His breath was warm against my neck, and I shivered as his hand slid down my back, pulling me closer. The dim light of the room cast shadows on the walls, but my focus was entirely on him, Ethan, the man who had so unexpectedly come into my life. His lips found mine, soft at first, then more insistent, as though he was trying to uncover secrets I wasn't ready to share. I let myself get lost in him, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the tension in his body as he held me tighter. His touch was both careful and possessive, as if he was afraid I might slip away. The bed creaked beneath us as we moved together, the world outside fading into nothingness. For a moment, I forgot about the doubts, the suspicions, and the shadows lurking in both of our pasts. In his arms, there was nothing but heat, intensity, and the unspoken promise of something I desperately wanted to believe in. Ethan's hands roamed over my skin, his touch igniting sparks that seemed to chase away the cold uncertainty lurking in the corners of my mind. He leaned into me, his lips trailing from my neck to my collarbone, with a deliberate slowness that sent a shiver down my spine. My hands found his shoulders, gripping tightly as I pulled him closer. Our bodies pressed together in an unspoken rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. The heat between us built with every kiss, every caress, until it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of us, and the electric currents passing between us. He murmured my name against my skin, his voice rough and filled with a longing that matched my own. My fingers threaded through his hair as he moved against me, his touch firm but reverent, as though he was trying to memorize every detail of me. Time seemed to slow as we moved together, our breaths mingling in the stillness of the room. Each touch, each whispered word felt like a promise, a fleeting connection in a world that felt so uncertain. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to let go, to give in to the moment and the man who held me. For a moment, I was safe, cocooned in his warmth and the fragile illusion that this was real, that we could hold on to this without it slipping through our fingers. But deep down, I knew that the shadows of truth and doubt still lingered, waiting to resurface when the glow of the night faded. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, his hand lazily tracing circles on my bare shoulder. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the whirlwind I had been swept into. Ethan seemed different from the others, gentle yet driven, passionate yet guarded. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a chance encounter. Something about him made me uneasy, though I couldn't decide if it was his intensity or my own guilt. My name is Leah Morgan, and I've never been one for romance. Relationships always seemed messy, and trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. After a messy divorce that left me with more baggage than I cared to admit, I swore off anything resembling intimacy. That was until Ethan Harper walked into my life. I met him at a small wine bar where he approached me with a disarming smile and an earnestness that felt out of place in a city full of jaded strangers. We talked, we laughed, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. I didn't expect it to go beyond a conversation, but Ethan was persistent, and I found myself drawn to him in ways I hadn't anticipated. What I didn't know then was that Ethan wasn't just a charming stranger. He was a detective investigating a series of murders linked to personal ads. Ads I had answered, though I hadn't realized the danger at the time. When he asked me out, I had no idea I was already a part of his case. There was a tension between us, a storm that neither of us could ignore. I had invited him to my apartment, wanting to see if what we shared could exist outside the haze of wine and fleeting glances. Ethan arrived late, his eyes tired, but lit with an intensity that sent a thrill through me. We barely made it to the couch before his hands were on me, his lips pressing against mine in a way that felt almost desperate. There was something raw and urgent in his touch, as if he was trying to hold on to me, to keep me from slipping through his fingers. I let him lead, my body responding to his in a way that felt inevitable. His lips trailed from my jawline to my collarbone, leaving a fire in their wake. I felt the weight of him as he pressed me against the cushions, his body fitting perfectly against mine. His touch was rougher this time, not out of carelessness, but out of an urgency that mirrored my own. I arced into him, letting his strength ground me, even as my thoughts swirled in chaos. I tugged at his shirt, eager to feel his skin against mine, to erase the distance that had lingered between us since we first met. He pulled away briefly to pull his shirt over his head, his eyes meeting mine in a gaze so intense it made my breath catch. "Leah," he whispered, his voice low and filled with something I couldn't quite name. Desire, regret, maybe both. I silenced him with a kiss, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him closer, needing the connection more than I wanted to admit. The room was filled with the sound of our breathing, heavy and uneven, punctuated by whispered words and soft gasps. When it was over, we lay tangled together on the couch, the storm outside echoing the storm that still lingered between us. Ethan brushed a strand of hair from my face, his expression softening in a way that made my chest ache. For a moment, it felt like everything was real, like the secrets and lies didn't exist, but deep down, I knew better. This was just another step toward the inevitable. But as the passion between us reached its peak, I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. His hands lingered too long, his eyes searching mine as if he was trying to read something I wasn't ready to share. I kissed him harder, trying to distract us both from the questions neither of us wanted to ask, and for a while it worked. The truth unraveled slowly, like a thread being pulled from a carefully woven fabric. I realized Ethan was hiding something long before he admitted it. The late-night phone calls, the way his expression darkened when certain topics came up. It all pointed to a secret I couldn't ignore. When I confronted him, his admission hit me like a tidal wave. He was a cop, and I was one of his suspects. My heart raced as I tried to process the betrayal, the feeling of being both a pawn and a person he genuinely cared about. Ethan swore he believed I was innocent, but the doubts lingered between us like a shadow. In the end, it wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about trust. Could I trust the man who had lied to me, even if his intentions were noble? Could he trust me, a woman whose past was full of unanswered questions? The tides of desire and suspicion pulled us both under, leaving us gasping for air, caught in a love that was as dangerous as it was undeniable.